As the sun rose over the bustling city of ancient Egypt, the scene was one of stark contrast. The grandeur of Egypt's architectural marvels was shadowed by the harsh reality of its laborers. Hebrew slaves toiled under the scorching sun, their bodies glistening with sweat as they labored to build massive structures. Taskmasters with cruel whips patrolled the ranks, enforcing the harsh conditions imposed by Pharaoh. The cries of God's people pierced the air, a desperate plea for relief from their oppression. For 400 years, what began as a refuge had become a prison. But amidst the suffering and despair, a glimmer of hope was about to emerge. In the midst of this suffering, a fragile hope was born. Along the banks of the Nile River, a Hebrew woman named Jochebed faced a heart-wrenching decision. Under Pharaoh's decree, every Hebrew male child was to be killed. Defying the decree, Jochebed placed her infant son in a small basket, weeping as she set it adrift on the river. With a prayer for divine protection, she watched as the basket floated away. Pharaoh's daughter, bathing in the river, discovered the basket and, moved by compassion, took the child as her own. Unbeknownst to her, she was nurturing the very one who would challenge her father's empire. Years passed, and Moses grew up in the opulence of Pharaoh's palace. Yet, his heart remained with his people. After a dramatic turn of events, Moses fled Egypt and settled in the land of Midian. It was there, on Mount Horeb, that he encountered a divine phenomenon. Before him stood a bush that burned with intense flames but was not consumed. In this awe-inspiring moment, God spoke to Moses, calling him to return to Egypt not as a prince but as a deliverer. The task was clear: lead God's people to freedom and confront the might of Pharaoh. Moses, now a prophet of the living God, returned to Egypt. His arrival was not marked by royal fanfare but by a divine mission. He stood before Pharaoh in his grand throne room, holding nothing but a simple staff. The air was thick with tension as Moses boldly declared God's command, "Let my people go, that they may serve me." Pharaoh's response was a hardened refusal, setting the stage for a confrontation that would challenge the very foundations of Egypt. With each refusal, God demonstrated his power through a series of devastating plagues. Water turned to blood, frogs swarmed across the land, locusts devoured crops, and darkness fell for 3 days. Each plague brought Egypt closer to its breaking point, yet Pharaoh's heart remained stubbornly hardened. It was not until the final, devastating blow, the death of the firstborn, that Pharaoh relented and agreed to release the Israelites. With Pharaoh's decree, the Israelites began their exodus from Egypt, filled with hope and relief. However, their journey was fraught with peril. As they reached the shores of the Red Sea, the sight of Pharaoh's pursuing army brought fear and despair. The sea, once a barrier, became the scene of a miraculous deliverance. Moses stretched out his hand, and the waters parted, creating a dry path for the Israelites to cross. As they moved safely to the other side, the waters returned, engulfing Pharaoh's army and securing their escape. Moses' journey did not end with the Red Sea. He continued to lead the Israelites through the wilderness, interceding for them and delivering God's law, a covenant that would define the identity of Israel for generations. Standing on Mount Nebo, Moses gazed out over the promised land, a landscape he would never enter but had labored to reach. His legacy was one of faith, perseverance, and obedience, a man who defied an empire and led a nation to freedom. In a modern setting, people reflect on Moses' story, recognizing its timeless relevance. His journey serves as a powerful testament to faith and obedience. Today, we face our own challenges, our own pharaohs. But like Moses, we are called to stand firm, trust in God's promises, and walk in his ways. With faith, we too can face insurmountable odds, knowing that God can part the seas before us.